Have you ever wondered why the midnight hour feels different? Why throughout Scripture, God seems to move with extraordinary power when the clock strikes 12? Tonight I'm going to reveal what truly happens in the spirit realm when you pray at midnight, secrets that could transform your prayer life forever. 3 years ago, I was at my lowest point, facing financial ruin, health challenges, and spiritual emptiness. Then one night, unable to sleep, I fell to my knees at exactly midnight. What occurred in that moment changed everything. The heavens opened in a way I had never experienced before. But this isn't just my story. From Paul and Silas singing at midnight while chained in prison, to God striking down the firstborn of Egypt at midnight during Passover. The Bible consistently shows us that midnight is a divine appointment with breakthrough. Before we continue, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. This revelation about midnight prayer could be the key that unlocks your season of breakthrough. What if I told you that in the next few minutes, you'll discover why angels are more active at midnight, how spiritual battles intensify, and the 5 supernatural things that happen when you pray while the world sleeps. Midnight marks the threshold between yesterday and tomorrow, a sacred moment when one day dies and another is born. In this divine transition, the spiritual atmosphere shifts, creating a unique opportunity for God's chosen ones to access heavenly realms. Throughout Scripture, midnight wasn't randomly mentioned, it was strategically highlighted as God's appointed time for extraordinary intervention. In Exodus 12:29, God executed judgment on Egypt at midnight. In Acts 16:25-26, Paul and Silas weren't just praying at midnight. They were strategically engaging heaven when suddenly an earthquake shook the prison foundations and every chain was loosed. This wasn't coincidence. This was divine timing. Why is midnight so powerful? First, it's when distractions diminish. The world grows quiet, phones stop ringing, and social media notifications fade away. Second, it requires sacrifice. Choosing to seek God instead of sleep demonstrates commitment that moves heaven. Third, midnight represents the darkest hour before dawn, symbolizing how God often moves most powerfully right before your breakthrough. I remember nights when my tears became prayers at midnight. The weight of my circumstances felt unbearable until I discovered this truth. Midnight is when God's ear is most attentive to your cry. If you're receiving revelation already, type midnight breakthrough in the comments. Your engagement helps spread this message to others who desperately need this word. Now, let me reveal what actually happens in the spirit realm when you pray at midnight, and why dark forces tremble when God's chosen ones kneel at this hour. At midnight, the spiritual battlefield intensifies. While most of the world sleeps, principalities and powers are actively working. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Your midnight prayers disrupt the enemy's plans with supernatural precision. When you pray at midnight, you're not just speaking words into the darkness. You're launching spiritual missiles against strongholds that have resisted daytime prayers. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Midnight is when these dark rulers are most active, but paradoxically, it's also when they're most vulnerable to the counterattack of prayer. Consider King David, who wrote in Psalm 119:62, "At midnight I rise to give you thanks." David understood that midnight gratitude and prayer broke through spiritual resistance that blocked his daytime petitions. Your midnight prayers carry extraordinary authority because they demonstrate uncommon commitment. When you sacrifice sleep to seek God's face, heaven takes notice. The enemy trembles not because of your words alone, but because your midnight sacrifice demonstrates a level of spiritual hunger that always attracts God's power. Are you facing impossible situations, persistent attacks, stubborn barriers? The breakthrough you've been seeking might be just one midnight prayer away. When you pray at midnight, angelic activity intensifies around you. Scripture reveals that God dispatches his angels to work on behalf of his people, and midnight prayers seem to activate this heavenly assistance with remarkable power. Remember the Passover night in Egypt. At midnight, the destroyer passed over the homes marked with blood, while God's people remained protected. This wasn't just a historical event, it established a spiritual pattern. Midnight prayers activate a similar protective covering over your life, family, home, and destiny. Psalm 91:11 declares, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." These aren't just poetic words, they're a spiritual reality that manifests powerfully during midnight intercession. Angels are dispatched to fight battles you can't see, remove obstacles you didn't know existed, and establish divine protection around everything that concerns you. I want you to pause this video right now and share in the comments a situation where you need divine protection or angelic intervention. As our community sees your comment, we'll stand with you in faith. What's even more powerful than angelic protection is what happens to your relationship with God during these midnight encounters. The intimacy that develops in these hours transforms not just your circumstances, but your very identity. In the stillness of midnight, something sacred unfolds between you and God, a level of intimacy that rarely manifests amid the noise of day. This is when the whisper of God becomes clearer than ever before. 1 Kings 19:11. 12 reveals that God wasn't in the earthquake, wind, or fire. He was in the gentle whisper. At midnight, when external voices fade, your spiritual ears become attuned to this divine whisper. Secrets of heaven, strategies for victory, and revelations of purpose flow more freely in these sacred hours. Think about Jacob at Peniel, wrestling with God through the night until daybreak. It was in this extended midnight encounter that his identity was forever changed from Jacob to Israel. Your midnight prayers aren't just about getting answers, they're about transformation of your very being. When you consistently meet God at midnight, you develop spiritual sensitivity that carries into your daylight hours. You begin to recognize his voice more quickly, discern his leading more accurately, and walk in greater authority. The most powerful testimonies I've received from viewers come from those who established a midnight prayer routine. Many report hearing God's voice for the first time with clarity during these hours. If you've experienced this divine intimacy at midnight, hit the like button right now as your testimony. Now let me show you how midnight prayer brings supernatural healing. Midnight is God's operating room, a divine space where spiritual surgery takes place, removing wounds that have resisted healing in other prayer settings. There's something about the vulnerability of these hours that allows deeper restoration to occur. Job 33:15-16 reveals, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears." God often performs his deepest healing work when our natural defenses are lowered at night. The wounds of rejection, trauma, betrayal, and disappointment that have shaped your responses for years can be divinely extracted during midnight prayer. Areas where you've built walls even against God become accessible in these intimate hours. I've witnessed people receive instantaneous emotional healing during midnight prayer, burdens they carried for decades suddenly lifted, memories that tormented them for years finally losing their sting. The midnight hour creates a sacred space where God's restoration power flows unhindered. This healing extends beyond emotions into divine alignment with your purpose. At midnight, the veil between your current reality and God's divine purpose for your life becomes thinner. Confusion clears, distractions fade, divine clarity emerges. Joseph received his most significant dreams during the night seasons. Daniel's greatest visions came during hours of darkness. God has consistently used the midnight hour to download destiny-altering revelation to his chosen ones. When you pray at midnight, you position yourself to receive similar clarity about your purpose. The questions that plague you during daylight hours: am I on the right path? What's my next step? How do I overcome this obstacle? often find their answers in these sacred moments. Your midnight prayers align your spirit with heaven's frequency. Like tuning a radio to the right station, you begin to receive clear signals about your divine assignment. Decisions that seemed impossible become obvious. Paths that were hidden suddenly appear. This alignment doesn't happen automatically, though. It requires intentional approach. Let me share the practical steps that transform midnight prayer from religious ritual to life-changing encounter. To experience the full power of midnight prayer, follow these 5 strategic steps. First, prepare your heart before midnight arrives. Begin winding down spiritually at least an hour before. Turn off distractions, read scripture, and create an atmosphere of worship in your space. Second, enter with thanksgiving rather than immediately presenting requests. Psalm 104 instructs us to enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. This posture opens spiritual doors. Third, use the sword of Scripture. Declare God's promises over your situations. When you pray the word at midnight, you're wielding heaven's authority against hell's strategies. Fourth, practice spiritual listening. After you pray, remain silent for at least 10 minutes. Keep a journal nearby to record impressions, scriptures, or divine strategies that come. Finally, seal your prayer time with declarations of faith. Speak as though your breakthrough has already happened, because in the spirit realm, it has. These steps aren't complicated, but they are transformative when applied consistently. Now, let me leave you with final encouragement that will revolutionize your prayer life. Chosen one, your midnight prayers are not going unnoticed in heaven. Every tear, every whispered word, every moment of sacrifice as you seek God while others sleep is creating a spiritual momentum that will soon manifest in your visible reality. Remember these 5 supernatural things that happen when you pray at midnight. Spiritual warfare intensifies in your favor. Divine protection and angelic assistance activate. Intimate communion with God transforms your identity. Deep healing and restoration occur. Divine alignment with your purpose becomes clear. The enemy would rather you sleep through your midnight moment because he knows the breakthrough that awaits when you pray instead. This is why you often feel most tired, most discouraged, or most distracted right when you plan to pray at midnight. Push through. The resistance you feel is evidence of the power that awaits. If this message has stirred your spirit, take 3 actions right now. Subscribe to Spirit Channel for more revelation. Share this video with someone who needs spiritual breakthrough, and most importantly, commit to midnight prayer for the next 7 days. Then return to the comments section to share your testimony. The midnight hour is calling God's chosen ones. Will you answer? May your midnight prayers shake prison doors, break every chain, and release the fullness of God's purpose in your life. Until next time, remember, at midnight, heaven is listening,